What's up, everybody? Welcome to MGS Sports. We're going to talk a little sports today with my good buddy, Donnie Druin. Me and Donnie have known each other for so long. What's up, my man?
Childhood best friends, man. What's up? How are you?
I'm good. How's life? How's Arizona?
Good, man. I think it's gonna climb into the 70s this week, so I'm blessed. I cannot complain at all. I went back to Pittsburgh for the Cardinals Steelers game. That was cold. Every year in Indy for the NFL Combine, it gets cold to me. So for now, I'm just happy to be in sunny, very nice weather.
I would die for that. I mean, it's a whopping 17 degrees here in Kentucky, but at least we're not in Buffalo shoveling snow out of Buffalo Stadium just so they can host a playoff game today.
Did you see they're behind schedule? As
Yeah.
we speak, they are behind schedule getting that snow out of there.
I've been following Twitter this morning, and it's absolute chaos over there. I mean, they got fans shoveling around the clock. It's just absolute chaos.
Yeah, you look at because everybody thinks, oh man, like it's Buffalo, like they wanted an outdoor stadium, like for this kind of stuff. But I mean, getting 70,000 people tuned from that stadium would have been a nightmare on Saturday, let alone today. But like, it's weird to me because let's say for whatever reason, obviously the game will be played today, but if they push it to Tuesday, like what's that do for the NFL schedule? Because like that team. Whoever wins is already going to be at a disadvantage, having
Right.
one less rest day heading to next weekend. And like those guys are probably going to be playing, um, depending on like the seating, like they might be playing a team coming off of like a week of rest, right? I mean,
Right.
so
Right.
it's a lot to take into effect. Like I already thought like the one Monday Night Football game was stupid. As a football fan, having two games today, I'm definitely not complaining, but
Not at all. Not at all. We'll take a doubleheader every day. Like let's stretch this out. No, I do think it's just crazy to think like what are the options and you've got 3, 4, 6 feet of snow. I don't know how much is out there, but what's another day do for the stadium? Now, I'm sure it's not necessarily the stadium as it is resources and getting people there and from and all of that type of stuff with the state of emergency, but it is absolute chaos. Well, Donnie, I mean, we've had a couple of games here already. We had Saturday night. The Texans came out and played some good ball. The Cowboys really struggled last night. What is kind of your overall thoughts on the game you've seen so far?
yeah, it's nuts, man. The Houston Texans might be for real, and I feel like they've been saying they've been for real this entire time, but the entire country has
Yeah.
been, I guess, waiting for CJ Stroud and the Miko Ryans to come back to earth, and so far they haven't, right? I mean, they're on this almost Cinderella type run. Nobody thought, especially people in here in Arizona, people thought here they were going to have two top 5 picks
Right.
heading to the 2024 draft. But I mean, what Stroud has done with, I mean, not to slander any of those guys because they are really, really good players, but heading into the season, it felt like you and I were catching passes from him, and he just managed.
Absolutely.
He's managed to make everybody around him better. D'Amico Ryans is rallying the troops in Houston, so I've been crazy impressed by them. Did not see the Cowboys game coming at all.
Oh
You
my
you could
goodness.
have talked me into the Packers winning maybe in that fashion, in that manner. I would have never believed you. But I
Yeah.
mean, it's the NFL. It is the world's greatest reality show, and you hear so many people in the business say it's a week to week league, and it really is, man. Because if you don't
Yeah.
show up and you don't pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you're going to lose that week. And I think that Green Bay Dallas game was a perfect example of that.
Well, you think back to the Cardinals game when Josh Dobbs was the starting quarterback for the Cardinals and they go out and beat Dallas the way that they did. And you're right. If you do not show up week to week, you really can get beat by anybody in the league. And I think that's what makes this league so special. But, I love the Texans story. I mean, to watch a rookie quarterback come in with some wide receivers that nobody really knew of until this season. And just to think back of all the draft chaos, of all the talk of CJ Stroud doesn't test well in the draft, to see him ball out has been something special to watch with a rookie head coach and a rookie quarterback. It's been really cool to see.
Well, I mean, and I'll admit it, I wasn't really high on Stroud coming out. And like, granted, I think looking back, I was just scouting the helmet, right? Because a lot of those Ohio State quarterbacks, they come into the pros out of that one read offense, and they really struggle to kind of see the field and progress through the reads because they're not being asked to make one look at Marvin Harrison Jr. then throw the ball 40 yards, right? Like you have to actually process what defenses are giving you. I thought
Right.
he would struggle with that. There was some talks and reports like you had mentioned where he wasn't exactly testing super well. And I think that just goes to show you, man, some dudes just put the helmet on, they go out there and they ball.
Yeah, it's been really cool to watch. I think, like you said, the Dallas game was a shocker. I mean, I thought that Dallas would come out and handle the Packers pretty well. What do you think really went into that game and how it unfolded? I really feel like Dallas came out and felt like they had all the pressure on them, causing them to play really tight, and Dak just really, really struggled last night.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of pressure when you put that star on the helmet on anyway, right? Let alone a game where people are really hyping you up as a potential Super Bowl contender. For my money, San Francisco. I mean, the road through the NFC goes through there.
Yeah,
But I thought if you took the Niners out of the equation, Dallas was probably my favorite personally to make a deep run. I don't know, man. It feels like we have the same conversation every year. They're such a talented team. They have names on both sides of the ball. Granted, they were missing Trevon Diggs. But like they were playing well without him after he had that season-ending injury. So really no excuses, my man. If we're keeping it a buck, to me, like the Packers came out, punched him in the mouth. They established a run early, right? It felt like they could not stop a very healthy Aaron Jones. Jordan Love was having a field day back there. I mean, it felt like so many receivers were wide open, and
unreal.
it felt like all of Dallas's problems that kind of sprinkled itself throughout the regular season just came together and snowballed and into
Yeah,
just giant apathy that we saw on Saturday
yeah.
night.
Yeah, it definitely seemed like it happened really fast and really quick for the Dallas Cowboys. I was, surprised at the offense, but we have seen their offense struggle in years past. But the defense of how they struggled to stop the run. I mean, obviously Aaron Jones played a terrific game, and the Packers had some great play calling. Uh, but at one point, it was just like, we're going to run the ball at you because you can't stop it. And that's what really, really surprised me.
Yeah, and I love they were up by a handful of scores in the fourth quarter. It was a 4th and 2 down near Dallas's goal line. And Flores like, nah, we're going for the kill shot. We're not kicking the field goal. And they got it. They ended up getting the touchdown. I know Dallas made it the game a little bit closer than a lot of people had thought near the end, but man, just for a team that was supposed to be rebuilding, nobody had really known what to expect out of Jordan Love and the Packers this year. I mean, they are far exceeding expectations.
Yeah. Well, especially, I mean, they struggled in the early stages of this season, and they turned it around. So I think that was a heck of a coaching job and a heck of a job by Jordan Love, just to relax, go play some football and sling it around a little bit. And I think that really freed him up to play well. I think that, the other game with the Chiefs and the Dolphins was, coming into last night, we were all saying, heck, can we even get a close ball game in the fourth quarter at any point? Because most of these games were blowouts. But I thought the Chiefs, just handled their business. But man, Tua really struggles in that cold weather, and just Dolphins did not play well at all.
Yeah, it's crazy how night and day that team looks when it's not 70 and sunny in Miami, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it feels like when they're playing at Hard Rock, they're unstoppable. I mean, there's so
Yeah.
much speed on the field. Granted, you do have to take the weather into effect, I feel like, because like that snow and that like icy turf just really slows down a lot of the speed stuff they want to do. And it's kind of just
Right.
how the team's built, man. Like, you live with it and you die by it. Their inability to really kind of like dig their feet deep in the trenches and really establish a running game, which is weird because they have Mostert and A-Chain back there, right? Like
Right.
you would not figure they would struggle, but when you're in the elements, when you're in KC, when you're playing against a team that has numerous Super Bowl experiences, let alone playing in the postseason.
Right.
They're a little bit more equipped to kind of buckle their chin strap up a little bit more tightly and get after it. And I don't think KC like ran away with that game, but I mean you could tell what team had that experience, what team was prepared, and what team wasn't. And it's I don't want to say a newly assembled team under Mike McDaniel. I think he's doing a very, very good job, but definitely a good learning experience for those guys. I think you're trying to keep it on the bright side.
Right. And it was kind of the first year that they have gone on a little bit of a run here and jump into, a big time game like that against the Chiefs. And so, Dolphins aren't going anywhere. Nobody thinks that.
No.
But I do think it may be, winning that division may be crucial to not have to go on the road to Buffalo or to Kansas City in a way like that. But it kind of seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Donnie, but it kind of seems, as much as they can be, obviously, with just the eyeballs on them, but it kind of seems like everybody's talking about every other team in the AFC besides the Chiefs, that they're almost, compared to other years, they're almost like under this radar of like, we're just going to take care of our business. Y'all talk about the other teams. And I think they kind of like that, because they're going to be like, hey, we're still one of the best in the NFL.
Yeah, I love it, because it's weird. You never would put the underdog label on a defending Super Bowl champion, right? That just makes no sense at all. But like, you look at how Kansas City finished the season, because I mean, if we want to bring this back to like week 5, week 6, week 7, I mean, they're rolling. Like, Kansas City is rolling. They look like they're going to repeat, and then they just slow down. Like, they, for whatever reason, they just lost their footing. And like, are they getting it back now after a big win in Miami? We'll see. I think a lot of that conversation is due to Kansas City kind of just falling off at the end. I think a lot of it, though, it's just how dominant the Baltimore Ravens have been. I know that's not exactly something you or I want to say cheering for divisional rivals, but man, like it's in a very weak AFC conference. I think it would take a lot for the Baltimore Ravens not to go to at least the AFC Championship game. I mean, they just, when they're at their best, they are head and shoulders above everybody else.
Well, and I think it needs to happen, because, the label on Lamar is he can't win in the playoffs and all of that that's going on. So they do need to go on a little run here. I think it'll be interesting. But yeah, I do think that is your AFC Championship right there between those two teams. But the Ravens have looked as good as anybody in the NFL and as consistent. I mean, they really haven't taken like this huge leap and then come back down. They've just been even steel domination throughout most of the way. And I think that, we can hope for a great AFC Championship in Baltimore versus Kansas City, which is something we don't normally see is the Kansas City Chiefs going on the road. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out as well.
Yeah. Isn't Mahomes scheduled to play his like first road playoff game
in his career?
That's just nuts, man.
Yeah,
that's nuts. At least as a full-time starter.
Yeah, absolutely nuts. Well, I think the best game that we saw was definitely the Lions and the Rams. I absolutely loved being able to sit down and just watch that game for the city of Detroit. Man, how about a month for Detroit? You've got Michigan wins the national championship. You get to host a playoff game for the first time in ever. And in our lifetime, Donnie, the Lions have finally won a playoff game.
Crazy. I was hoping you would continue the Detroit rant and mention the Pistons and how awful they're doing. But,
oh yeah, well, I mean, we can say that for
but yeah,
the Pistons have some work.
They do, man. And shout out to Monty for trying to get those guys together. But dude, like just like you said, man, like it was probably the best game of the weekend so far. We got 2 more coming today, but I mean, to be able to watch that unfold, and like, it felt like a track meet. Like, it really felt like, okay, like whoever slips up first, like first to reach X amount of points is going to win, right? Back and forth the entire game, start to finish. That was probably the best 60 minutes of football we got. And like, how do you not like Dan Campbell, man? Like, being able to see him rally the troops, like he has me ready to run through a wall whenever he talks.
I mean, I would pay a lot of money for him and Mike Brayville to just be in a UFC fight. I mean, that's got to happen at some point for pay-per-view in itself. But the dude is just, what he's done in Detroit has been unbelievable. And I honestly don't think that there's a more likable coach in the sense of, if I have to pick who I'm playing for that guy. I mean, you saw it. I mean, in week 18, all these teams are like, we're going to set our players. And probably the right move for most of those teams. Dan Campbell said, nah, we want to win this. I know a lot has to happen for us to not, whatever. But for a guy just to say, this is football, and if we're playing and there's another team that loses, I want to be on the winning side. He's just such a great story. I really liked the QB narrative coming in. And I think one thing that wasn't talked about enough with this is not only like just the love that Stafford got. I mean, props to a guy, and I know it's a different age now, but for a guy to stay as long as he did in Detroit, to not have as much success, was super happy, even though Joe couldn't pull it out in that Super Bowl for me. I wish that they would have, but I was super happy to see him win that one. I think what's not talked about in that narrative much is that the trade worked out for both parties. Like
Mhm.
the Rams weren't happy with Goff fully. The Lions were ready. Matt was ready to move on. And really, Matt got his Super Bowl. The Lions got their playoff game. They're on a run here. It's really worked out well for both teams.
Yeah, and it's so rare you see a trade like that really kind of balance out on both sides, right? I mean, everybody knows how long Stafford stayed in Detroit, and I think he earned the opportunity to go play elsewhere and go play for a championship. And I do think getting Jared Goff back in that trade, I was never a huge Goff guy to begin with. I just thought he needed like the right pieces around him, and slowly but surely, the Lions did exactly just that. That they put good football players around him. They tailored the offense to what he does best, and I think you're seeing a lot of that come to fruition. And one thing I do want to touch on, Matthew, is you see a lot of the trends nowadays to hire like these like young like offensive bright minds, which is for sure the right way to go.
Right.
It's where you see the like chiseled defensive minded guy really kind of get the best out of his players. But when you look at guys like Dan Campbell, when you look at D'Amico Ryans and what he's doing in Houston, and even looking here in the desert with what Jonathan Gannon has kind of done in the last 365 days, as head coach here, it's all about culture, right?
Yeah.
Like you can design whatever plays you want. You can spend however much money you want. If you don't have the right winning culture, you're just not going to get it done in the postseason. And I think that's why
Yeah.
you're seeing the success of guys like Dan Campbell and guys like D'Amico Ryans early in Houston.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting conversation for those Charger fans and Jaguars fans that have a lot of talent in there, a lot of expectations, and just for some reason are not able to get it fully over the hump into the playoffs on a run. And so I think you're right, and I think that's what Dan Campbell has done best in Detroit is set a culture. And I think he started with that. I don't think he started about bringing all these people in and flipping everything upside down.
Yep.
It was, we're going to establish a winning culture first, and that's what's got to happen. And so it's been really, really cool to see. What about tonight, Donnie? I mean, we've got two double headers coming up. I know the Eagles are kind of limping into this one, and the Steelers have just found a way to win game after game, whether it's pretty or
Somehow.
not. What are you kind of looking forward to those two games?
Yeah, man. If the Buffalo Steelers game is any indication of what it should be, which is just a straight do not throw the ball more than 10 times, really try to establish the run kind of thing. The presence of TJ Watt will definitely be missed, but the Steelers have been running the ball very, very well. And I definitely don't want to
Mhm.
discount them. But I mean, there's no doubting how talented the Buffalo Bills are. And when they're on, right? I mean,
Yeah,
there's few teams in the NFL that can really go punch for punch with them whenever Josh Allen's not turning the ball over 3 times per game.
right.
So I'm excited to watch that one. I think Buffalo is still kind of my pick for that game. I wouldn't be shocked if the Steelers won. I'm kind of liking Tampa Bay in the other matchup, man. Like Jalen Hurts has not thrown a football here in days, right? No AJ Brown this week. Correct me if I'm wrong. There was something with Devontae Smith too, right? Like he was
I know
hobbled in
he's
coming in.
Yeah, I know he's been banged up. I haven't heard if he's gonna play. I think AJ Brown is a big piece to be missing for the Eagles there, and I just think sort of like the Steelers, like the Bucks aren't gonna flash you to where you're really impressed with them, but they just figure out a way to win games. Baker, has had a pretty good year to come in,
Man.
and I mean, for not playing much and then come in with that teams, and you still got playmakers and Chris Godwin and Mike Evans
Mhm.
out there. I really think that could be an upset tonight. Wouldn't mind sprinkle a little money line on that, see what happens. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's really interesting. I think that Buffalo, to me, is almost like a sleeping giant to wake up whenever they want, right? Like you said, if Josh Allen could just not turn the ball over, and I don't know if it's scheme of defense, or to me it seems like he's trying to do a little bit too much by himself. They haven't really gotten Diggs to really get going like they had the
Mhm.
last couple years. So I think if they can figure those pieces out, man, they could go on a little bit of run in the AFC with the playmakers they have.
It's weird because I feel like the last 3 or 4 years, we've looked at the Bills team and said, "Okay, they gotta go to a Super Bowl one of these years,"
Yeah,
right? Like, it feels
yeah,
like there's this revolving door. It's like, all right, Mahomes has been to a few. Okay, Joe Burrow, like you finally got to one. Cool. Like, who's next, right? Like, who's going to
yeah,
be the next AFC quarterback? They're going to get their team. It could be Lamar this year. It could be Josh Allen. And like you said, man, sometimes it's just Josh doing too much. You know how talented
right.
he is. You know the freaky arm talent that Josh Allen has. But I mean, if he can't limit the turnovers and really keep his team from winning, I mean, it's tough. It's so tough. The Buffalo Bills are one of the weirdest teams in the NFL to me because they could lose any given week and you wouldn't be shocked, and they could win any
Yeah,
given week and you really wouldn't be
yeah,
shocked. The Steelers still somehow keep finding a ways to win, like you said. I think the Mason Rudolph Cinderella run comes to an end this weekend. I think the
yeah,
pumpkin turns back. Um, I don't know. Like you said, man, I would probably sprinkle a little bit money on Tampa Bay. Baker's playing really well, man. Baker's playing extremely well. And you look at guys like him, Geno Smith, sometimes guys just need a new scenery.
yeah, yeah. I mean, Gino is a great example of that. I mean, I don't think anybody, you know, would have taken him as a head coach to bring him in as a quarterback. Just seeing what he did in New York, but I think that was really impressive. The way that Pete Carroll was able to kind of revive him a little bit. Donnie, I know Black Monday's already happened. We've had a couple of guys retire. We've had a couple of guys get let go. What was the most surprising to you in that folding of Black Monday?
Man, I don't want to say surprising, but just because it finally happened, and you already know where I'm going with this. Belichick leaving New England. You there was a part of me that wanted him to go after Brady left, just so we could stop talking about the Brady
Right.
Belichick debate, right? I don't blame him for trying to stick around. And to be fair, man, like the teams he had the last few years was just simply not good.
At all.
And it's a shame that the last remaining thoughts of Bill in New England are going to be those football teams rather than just the dynasty that he had created. I'm more interested to see where he goes next because it really sounds like he is not done coaching. And
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw any of the reports popping up, but apparently there was a NFL playoff team that was labeled a surprise candidate for
Uh-oh.
him. And a lot of people think that might be the Dallas Cowboys. So we'll
Oh,
see.
wow. Well, especially after last night, it'll be really interesting to see where Jerry Jones decides to go. And I think if there's an opening from a playoff team like the Cowboys, I think Belichick hops on that right away. And I think him and Jerry Jones would be a decent fit together. But yeah, I think him stepping down was not totally surprising because we kind of heard it a little bit. I think Robert Kraft deserves a little bit of a kudos on the way that he allowed Belichick and allowed Brady to kind of go out on their own terms, not having to get a bunch of cash or trade picks or whatever it may be from that. But I think for me, it's almost like just a reflection moment because I think this is like the final chapter closed of that early 2000s, all us 90s babies. What we remember of the NFL growing up with Roethlisberger, Brady, Manning, Belichick, you know, that chapter's finally feels like it's closed.
It's such a different game than it was whenever we grew up watching, and it's crazy because like you'll see a guy get his head taken off, and like to me who
Right,
played football and who's been watching it for years, man, that wasn't a flag at some point in time, right? And like granted, like and I'm glad the NFL is taking those precautions to help the player safety initiative,
right,
but man, like you talk about like running backs aren't going like top 5, top 10 anymore, like and there's really been a giant shift in just the overall philosophy, how the game's played, how the game's watched. Even I mean,
right.
we had that whole Peacock thing over the weekend, which is dumb. And like they're going to come out and say it was the highest rated ever streamed NFL game, and that's just going to have more companies go and do that in the future, which is irritating. But
So
yeah,
dumb.
man, dude, it's awful, man. The NFL is so greedy, and I hate it.
Yeah, well, I think Pete Carroll stepping down was probably the most surprising to me of
Okay.
any of them. I thought the weirdest move was the Titans letting go of Bravels. I really like him. I understand that the Titans have not been what they've wanted to be, but I think he is a really good coach. Really surprised he didn't get the New England job. Thought that was the direction they should have gone. We'll see if Mayo is any good up there. But it'll be interesting to see, with Harbaugh potentially interviewing with the Chargers, Bravel's available, where that goes with teams like Atlanta, the Chargers, and heck, I really love what the Raiders did and finally making their interim head coach their head coach because he had a heck of a season as well.
Yeah, the NFL coaching carousel was definitely one to watch this year too. We haven't even brought up the Panthers, right? And how interesting of a
Yeah,
job that is because you're going to be a new head coach coming in. You don't have a first round pick, right? Your rookie quarterback isn't exactly flashing the potential he should be as a number one overall pick. The GM is gone too out of Carolina, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah, so total reset that roster. When you compare the Panthers team to openings like Seattle, maybe Dallas, I mean, like even like Tennessee, Tennessee doesn't have a great roster, but I think they're in a better place than the Panthers are right now. So,
Right.
interesting to see like who passes up on that, who kind of put their name in a ring for it. A name we haven't really talked a whole lot about is Dan Quinn, right? The Cowboys
Right.
offensive coordinator. Right before we hopped on, he's got like 4 interviews this week, all through
Hmm.
Zoom. He's like the most popular man in America's coaching carousel. Apparently, I'm curious to see where he goes. Everybody keeps saying Seattle. Maybe I mean he was the DC for the Legion of Boom whenever they had their giant run. That
Okay.
makes sense. How would you feel about Vrabel going to Seattle?
Yeah, I think that could be a potential fit up there, especially with a team that's got history of playing some hard-nosed defense and just running backs that are kind of punch you in the mouth, run downhill. I think that could work. I think I would also keep an eye on Washington. I think
Mhm.
Washington could be a good fit for him and just kind of a blue-collar type cold weather place like Washington. You got a top pick to be able to go get a quarterback. I think Washington is a very highly entertaining spot because of that pick, and you can kind of go get your franchise quarterback. You've got some playmakers on the outside. You did trade away Chase
I think
Young,
they
but
got a
that's
squad
okay.
over there, man.
Yeah,
I
I
think
think
they're a really good quarterback away.
yeah, and who doesn't want to go to a place that you would have the ability to help change the name? I mean, you could not be the Commanders anymore, and you get to decide what your mascot is, right?
I was a
But
fan of football team, but I mean
I was
that's just
too. Yeah, that's
I
because
thought it was sick. I thought it was sick, man. But
yeah.
what would you say is the best job on the market right now? Because to me, that's got to be the Chargers. Just like location,
Oh yeah,
stadium, talent
yeah.
on the roster, and dude, I really think if Harbaugh goes there, he can turn it around a lot faster than people think.
Oh yeah. I think the Chargers are a defense away from a playoff run. I mean, they have one of the deepest, most talented wide receiver, running back cores in the country, and they've got a gunslinger at quarterback. I mean, as an offensive guy or even just a football coach, why would you not want to walk into a place that has it halfway set up for you, right?
Mhm.
I think for me, the Chargers probably is the best, but the most intriguing to me is Atlanta. I think with a quarterback there, that place is different. I mean, you've got Kyle Pitts, who has not been fully utilized at
Yep.
all, which is a dang shame. You have Brian Robinson, who was utilized early, but still, I mean, Donnie, this team has spent millions and millions of dollars on these top draft picks, and none of them have been a quarterback. It was like second, third, fourth round that they got Desmond Ritter and they had Marcus Mariota. Like, get this team a quarterback and let's see what they can do.
Yeah, it's weird. It feels like they keep buying new toys from the store, but they're not taking them out of the wrapping. It's weird, man. Like let these guys play ball. Use Bijan Robinson like you should. Use Kyle Pitts like you should. Drake London is a very good
Yeah.
receiver in his own right too. I mean, it's there. Like it is there for the Falcons to be good. They just need the right person pulling the strings and calling the shots. So, I mean, we'll definitely see what they can do, because they're not in like super high position to go get a quarterback or one of like,
Right.
the top guys like a Caleb or a Drake May.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens with like Penix and like Jaden Daniels and stuff too.
Right.
But I think for right now, we at least know two guys are going in the top two or the top three. Do they wheel and deal? Do they call Chicago to see what they want for number two? I mean, it really feels like New England doesn't want to move out of number 2 or 3. I forgot where they're picking, but we'll see, man. Everything has a price, but no, I think you made a really good point. Atlanta, everybody looks at that job and it's like, dude, how are you guys not winning games? Like, it's
Yes.
just mind blowing.
Because they're like, oh, you play running back and you're like 35 into your career, come rush for us for 1,000 yards while we have just studs already. Like, let's maybe spend some money on a quarterback or maybe a defensive tackle. Like, let's just be a little smarter about this. So it'll be really interesting to see how that carousel goes into the offseason. And I know you're gearing up for a little draft preview as we get into the season. But let's put a bow on the NFL. What team would you say? You know, we like Buffalo and the Bucks tonight. What team as the lowest seed are you most confident in and going on a little run here? Is it, you know, a low seed is like a 3 and in the Lions, or do you like Green Bay to just continue this Cinderella run? Who's the lowest seed that you think could go on a little run here?
Man, I think the Green Bay Cinderella run ends next week and they run into the 49ers. And it's not an
Right.
indictment on Green Bay, but just more so of how well of an old machine the San Francisco Niners are right now, man. They really do look like an unstoppable force. Low seed, man, dude, it's got to be Buffalo. I feel like, just in terms of like, they already have that deep postseason experience. Like, their roster is largely the same. If they can get past the snow and the Steelers tonight, man, I mean, I've always been in the mindset that the AFC is definitely the weaker of the two conferences.
Right.
Like Baltimore, like, they're a great team, and like, for my money, they're still going to win the AFC, but like, they've yet to prove anything, right? Kansas City kind of looks like a shell of themselves, even though they do have that experience. So I don't know, man. It's always unpredictable. It's always the team you never really gave like a shot to doing it if it's not the Kansas City Chiefs. So if Buffalo gets going here, you know, they always say that it's not about the best team, it's about the hottest team. And the Bills strung together a handful of wins before coming in.
Yeah.
So I mean, I definitely think they're riding high.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if the Bills take care of business tonight, it'd be a heck of a week next week with Kansas City going to Buffalo and then Houston going to Baltimore. That's, you know, a weak AFC, but at least some really good games to watch there. Is it? I believe I know the answer to this question, but is the 49ers the team you're most confident in just finishing this thing off and winning Super Bowl?
I would believe so, and I don't want to discredit any of those teams in the NFC bracket, but I mean, I said it a little bit earlier. Dallas was my number 2 team in the NFC, and for them just to get dog walked like that, I mean, that really opens things up, because there's not a team I'm confident that can really beat the 49ers if both teams are having their best day. And that's kind of what you have to work under the assumption of, right? Like, you can't bank on the 49ers having a bad day on top of X team having a good day, right? You know, if
Right.
you're standing back and you're evaluating things, you have to say, okay, if both these teams are playing like they should, who's going to come out on top? I don't see Philly. I don't see Tampa Bay. I don't see Green Bay. And I don't see all the other teams in the bracket really doing what they do, man. It's just,
Yeah. I mean, I think the 49ers got a gift last night, and the Cowboys not making it. You know, I really hope the Niners and the Lions end up having a good game here, but I do think the Niners make it. And I think that Baltimore makes it, and that's your Super Bowl there. And I really like the Niners to finish that off with just the caveat of maybe Buffalo can put this together and go on a little run here. Because I think they have the firepower to beat anybody in the league like the Niners do. Yep. But the Niners put it together consistently. Buffalo hasn't. And maybe it's just the Buffalo like hopes. Like, you just see these playmakers and maybe they can't actually do it. But it's going to be an exciting 2024 as we go into round 2. Donnie, just give us a little wrap up on the Cardinals season. How did that go? Where's the fan base with this coaching staff, with Kyler, and just what the future looks like?
Yeah, you know, I think that conversation is a little bit different if we had this a year ago, right? You know, a year ago they had just fired Cliff Kingsbury. Steve kind of left for health reasons, aka he got the boot too.
Yep.
Nobody really knew what direction this organization was going in. No, head coach Jonathan Gannon came in, general manager Monty Austin Fort came in. And I really admire what they did because they just tore this thing down, right? Like so many guys, I feel like try to convince themselves that, you know, they're not too far away from maybe getting back into like a postseason team. No, these guys came in from day one, just tore this thing to the ground, trimmed all the fat off the roster necessary. And now, granted, 4-13, not exactly, you know, kind of like beat your chest record, right? That's really not a whole lot to be proud of, but you're looking at the future. Kyler not only came back healthy, but I think he looked good. So he's definitely going to be the guy moving forward here. 6 picks in the first 3 rounds of the 2024 NFL draft, 13 in total. You're going to have north of 60 million cap space this offseason. Really, their only big decision in free agency is going to be Marquise Brown, but I mean, that's probably going to handle itself with the little that he played. I would say the vibe is good, man. I would really say that there's a lot of hope for this team. And if they can replicate all the success that they had last offseason, I really think they're cooking. And honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if they kind of put themselves in the wild card race next year, assuming the dominoes continue to fall.
Yeah, I think that's, you know, Arizona's another team, firepower, you know, cap space now, lots of picks. So the future is definitely bright there. Where do you see them kind of going in the draft, and what are some of their biggest needs to kind of accomplish there in the draft?
You know, it's funny because you never really see eye to eye with a lot of like the fan base, right? Because everybody here is clamoring for Marvin Harrison Jr., and that's exactly what they need. They need a just legitimate game changer, a game wrecker, you know, whatever tag you want to put on a borderline generational prospect. Marvin Harrison Jr. fits it, right? Like it is nutty that you are the junior of a Hall of Fame player and you are a better college football prospect coming into the pros than your father was. It's just bonkers, right? 6'4", runs like a gazelle, catches everything in like a mile radius. Like he's exactly what the Cardinals need, but you never really know with Chicago picking ahead of them. New England might still go with the receivers. So if they don't get MHJ, I think Malik Neighbors from LSU is probably going to be the number 2 choice. You know, almost better than anybody how good Neighbors is as a receiver prospect. If they don't go receiver, I mean, Joe Wall or like Olu Fashanu from Penn State, like those are the top 2 guys. The cool thing about the Cardinals, Matthew, is that there's so many holes. They cannot get this wrong.
Right.
Unless they go Caleb Williams, right? Like there's so many different routes that they can take to improve the team.
With Chicago having the first pick and not kind of having anything in place now, but to me, with Chicago having the first pick and not making a move with their head coach, it almost to me seems like we're going to stick with him and see what Justin has. Who do you think kind of climbs up there and grabs that spot? Where do you think Chicago goes?
A lot of the people right now think they might stick and take Caleb. If I had to pick a team to move up, that's tough, man. I think I wouldn't be surprised if New England willed and dilled their way up, and I think that's a favorable spot for Chicago, dude, because Chicago can move back a couple spots, get a decent pretty penny for the number 1 pick, but still be in that top 3 range and still be able to get a guy like Marvin or a guy you have to help protect Justin Fields or Caleb or whoever they end up drafting. If I'm Chicago, I'm definitely trying to stay in the top 5 for sure. I think we're ready to touch on them, but like Atlanta. Like if you're Atlanta, how are you not pushing your chips to the middle of the table this offseason and going, okay, we need a young stud. I don't care if it's Caleb. I don't care if it's Drake May. We need a guy for the future. We need to go all in because this talent on the roster is young and we're not paying them quite yet. So we really need to kind of like go all in, like I said.
Right. And it boggles my mind how GMs, granted, I don't know what your job's like. You're probably way better at it than I am, but I'm talking sports, so I'm going to talk about it. How you can sit here and look at the league over the last 10, 20 years and move in the direction of all these like pieces on the outside before you solidify that quarterback. I mean, it is a quarterback league. You look across the headlines at every game and they're talking about the quarterback. And so I really hope, just for Atlanta's sake and Kyle Pitt's sake, that they can get a quarterback in there and just get those playmakers going a little bit. Donnie, for me, this might be a little extreme, but as I watched the Bengals, obviously Joe Burrow getting hurt was, not the storyline we wanted coming into this season. But a great storyline of Jake Browning stepping in and just playing well to have a competent backup is huge in the NFL, as you've seen 70, 60% of the league in the AFC, or maybe it was the whole league that had to have a backup quarterback play. But to me, I really hope in this draft that offensive line is taken care of, because you have playmakers outside, you have your quarterback. I think you've got a good back in Joe Mixon. That's going to run out eventually with that contract. But I think that Chase, who's the backup there, Chase Edwards or Chase Brown? Chase Brown there from Illinois has showed a lot of promising ability to replace Joe Mixon. You obviously have wide receivers. Do you think the Bengals go all in on the offensive line there, or do you think they take a little bit of defense, best player available? Any thoughts on where the Bengals should go or where they will go?
We'll see, man. I think a lot of people aren't talking about Jamar's contract extension and those talks coming in the offseason. I mean, he's going to reset the receiver market. It's kind of how it is, right?
Right.
Tyler Boyd's a free agent, isn't he? And then obviously T. Higgins is going to be hitting the market too, potentially. They might still franchise tag. I know there's a lot of talk about that. I don't know, man. I think if you lose Boyd or if you lose Higgins, that definitely ups the need for another receiver, because we've seen how good that trio has been for Burrow, for everybody on Cincinnati. Obviously, you can never go wrong addressing the offensive line or the defensive line, right? Like, it's not the sexy pick, it's not going to sell jerseys, but like that's what good football teams do. They build in the trenches and they build outwards. There's a handful of places they can go. I don't know, man, because they're picking. What pick are they in this year? The Bengals
they're late 20s,
18.
18, yeah.
So they're picking 18. I mean, that'll be right around probably Keon Coleman territory if you're looking for a receiver.
I would not hate that. I would not hate that at all. I really think that you do everything in your ability outside of selling the team to keep T. Higgins around. I think you saw it this year of how valuable he is with how a little injury prone Jamar can get. And when Jamar's out, T has showed he could be a one wide receiver at a lot of different teams. And so I think having that duo there would be really beneficial. I'd much rather them, restructure Joe Mixon to do, even if that means him leaving to get T to stay because of the lifespan of running back. But it'd be really interesting. We gotta figure a way to keep Joe healthy and keep him protected, because as you've seen, I mean, as he goes, the Bengals go. So it'd be interesting to see what the draft brings and just off season.
Yeah, no, it's a very big offseason. I feel like we say it every year, but like the dominoes and how they've fallen so far, like so many teams can either make or break the next 3 or 4 years of their trajectory. The Bengals included, man, they have a very big offseason coming up. I'm really interested to see how they kind of balance, like giving Jamar the money he deserves on top of trying to pay T. Higgins too. Do they want to keep T. Higgins around? Like what's the number they're looking for, right? Where it's like, okay, like we really can't get past here. T's probably going to want to be here. And I mean, if they lose T, they're going to get a 3rd round comp pick. Awesome. But like you would much rather have a guy like T than that 3rd round pick. Right.
Right. Well, it'll be interesting to see what T's asking price is there. Well, let's switch over to a little college football as we wrap up here. So one legend steps down, goes maybe to another team, and Bill Belichick, another legend, and Saban just decides to call it quits. What will Saban be kind of to you? What will you remember him as, and just kind of where does Alabama go from here?
Oh man, I'm gonna give you the vanilla answer. Saban is the greatest, right? The greatest to ever do it. I mean, when you sit back and you think of like our like childhood memories, like like watching football, like throwing the ball around, the stretch that Nick Saban had at Alabama is going to be very, very difficult to replicate across any sport, let alone the realm of college football.
Right.
Just dominant, man. Just like ruthless, relentless, and just like that he established a bar of winning that is so hard to capture year after year after year. And it really says something that he felt like he was a massive disappointment when he took his team to the college football playoff and they damn near almost went to the national championship game. It's like 120 other programs would love to have that problem, right? It was shocking to me because I thought he wanted to keep going, but I mean, very big props to him because like you got to know when to step away, you got to know when enough is enough. And man, I feel like so often a lot of these guys overstay their welcome, and they kind of just like deteriorate in front of our eyes. They're just not the same coach they used to be. So I think he's probably leaving at a good time. I'm sure he'll still have his oatmeal, Little Debbie cakes every morning with his coffee. So I think it's a well-deserved break of rest for a guy who's done nothing but win and just bring a lot of us some really cool memories watching college football growing up.
Yeah. And I mean, you think back to the late 90s, early 2000s of just what college football was to us growing up, to see Saban come in and do what he did at Alabama. Like you said, that's never going to be done again. Not only because there's not another Saban, but I just think where the transfer portal, NIL is, 12-team playoff, where it's going, I just don't see a guy coming in and doing that. But I think that, it was surprising to me that he didn't do it off the mountaintop. I thought that would be the case. But I do think that one of the things that I will remember about Saban is not only dominance, but I think I'll remember his last year a lot. Because if you think back to what was it, week 2 or week 3, Alabama's on the road at USF and Jalen Milroe gets benched. Saban went out in the offseason and got a couple of quarterbacks because he wasn't sure Jalen was the guy. And he somehow found a way to, one, dig out of the grave at Auburn and somehow win that game in that Jalen Milroe throw to Isaiah Bond. Incredible. But 2, just the ability to coach that team up and get to the college football playoffs and lose 5 yards short of what ended up being the national championship team in Michigan. So just his ability to do that with teams and quarterbacks that, yes, he did it with Tua and Jalen that are these all pros in the NFL, but he did it with guys like Greg McElroy and AJ McCarron and Blake Sims. I mean, he won games with guys at wide receiver like me and you, at quarterback like me and you, like just guys obviously a little better than us, but I mean, they weren't NFL Hall of Famers. And so the way that Saban was just able to take what he had each year and make it a winning formula was just so impressive.
I really like the point you brought up about the transfer portal too, because if I recollect, he was very, very against the broadening of it that we've seen today. It's really changing the game, man. We can have an entirely different podcast on whether it's changing for the best or worse, but like the landscape of college football as we know it is changing, right? I mean, it feels like these kids, it's almost like free agency in the NFL. You're getting NIL deals worth millions to come in to a certain program, to certainly stay. I mean, we can look at Ohio State. Granted, Marvin Harrison Jr. ended up declaring for the NFL draft, but a good portion of a lot of the guys that were kind of on the bench went back to school, and mainly because there's a giant NIL collective saying, hey, we can take care of you. We can take care of your family legally. Come back to school because you're probably not going to be a first or second round pick. So why don't you come back, get your drafts up a little bit, and then we can go from there. And it's a lot to keep up. It's a lot for a guy like Nick Saban to keep up because, he does not have the time or the manpower to really go out and not only scout these high school kids, but now you got to start scouting the teams you're playing every week now, just because you never know who's going to become available.
It's the number one job I would never want to have. I mean, if you think about it, you're sitting there, like you said, you got to recruit high school players. You've got to recruit your own team. You've got to go out and do film study, practice, all of that other stuff. You've got to figure out NIL and how that comes into play. I mean, just the chaos of 24/7 recruiting high school players and your own team and the transfer portal is just crazy. And I think everybody's on the same page, coaches included, but coaches especially for their sanity, is that something has to be done with the transfer portal and with the NIL. Now, I don't think any coach is saying we should get rid of all of it altogether. But what do you think we need to do, and where do you think the decision actually ends up going on just kind of mitigating a little bit of what the NIL and transfer portal is so that coaches can get back to coaching?
That's a damn question. That's tough, man, because I feel like it's just so open already. Like there's really no going back from how far this thing has gone, right? In terms of limiting it, like there's certainly a better way you can regulate it, because like we should not have like 6th or 7th year seniors. Like the fact that, and like a big shout out to Michael Penix, he played well, but he was in the same recruiting class as Trevor Lawrence. Like we need to have a very real conversation about how long these guys can stay in school, how many times they can transfer, and like the reason for transferring too, because like it used to be back in the day, and I feel so old saying this, but like if you didn't get playing time, like you worked your butt off and you stuck through it, and then eventually you got your shot, and that's just not the case anymore. Guys are fleeing at the first out of them, being knocked down the depth chart. I think we've completely lost the aura of the amateur college football game itself, right? Because it's like a business, and like granted, like we can't be naive. A lot of the payment stuff was probably happened beneath the table, but it wasn't so out in the open, right? Like Jordan Addison wasn't going to USC and openly getting $5 million to play one season there, right? Like, and that creates a lot of disadvantages for a lot of the big time schools who have very wealthy boosters that can really fund, these kids coming here. And it's almost like you're buying the talent rather than recruiting them. Like you're selling them on money rather than selling them on a culture or an identity or a program.
Well, and I think, everybody's got complaints about the transfer portal, but I look at a guy at Georgia like Brock Vandergriff. The transfer portal was created for a guy like Brock, 5-star coming out of high school. He gets to Georgia. Carson Beck plays phenomenal. Is a good player. He's the guy. Brock Vandergriff says, hey, I'm good. I'd like to play. I'm on one of the best teams in the country. Where can I go? He transfers to Kentucky. That is what the transfer portal was created for, in my opinion, or what it should have been. I don't know what it was actually created for, but that's what it was intended for, and that's what it should be used for, not the sense of I'm on my 6th team in 7 years kind of deal. And so, I think that NIL is a much harder conversation, because it's like, well, are we able to limit how much they actually make legally, what all that looks like? So I do think if you mitigate the transfer portal a little bit, let's get away from these 7-year seniors, 6 different teams. But this week, it was just a story of where we are in college football. I had a buddy of mine, was a former student of mine that just signed at a D1 college out of Illinois, or maybe it was D2. But he told me that he just signed about a week or two ago, and 2 days later, his offensive coordinator and his defensive line coach both left. So his position coach and his coordinator both left after he signed. And I had said, man, like that's just where we are in college football, is when you sign, one, you're making a 1-year commitment. And I think that's it, because at the end of the year, you're reevaluating, say, am I staying or am I going? And 2, you got to be signing to a school and not a coach, because just like players, those coaches are in and out. So it'll be interesting to see kind of where that goes. But hopefully that can be tamed a little bit. But let's talk a little bit on the field to wrap up here. What are your thoughts going into the next couple of seasons, 12-team playoff, these super conferences? You for it? You against it? Are you just excited to watch ball? Where are you at with all that?
I think I'm a little bit of everything, man. Like I definitely do not want. I was so against expanding the playoff, because I thought a lot of the playoff games we already get aren't that great. And so it's like, okay, we're going to get more of this. Like, granted, like I'm still going to watch. I'm still going to, get some, wings in the beverage and enjoy the awesome football ahead of me. But like, it's how many games do we actually need, right? Because if we expand it to 12 teams, team number 13 is going to get pissed off. If we move it to 16, team number 17 is going to be upset it didn't get in, and so on and so forth, right? End of the day, man, it's always been about money. These guys are going to make more money off of these playoff games. So I'm against the expansion. But I understand why it's happening. I'm definitely still going to tune in and watch. I just don't personally like it. On the field, man, we'll see. It's a weird time in college football. With the super conferences coming, I think we're going to see the end of the NCAA. I think they're going to start governing their own selves. And I think it's weird because college football used to be about tradition. Like, like
Right.
Pac-12, Big Ten playing in the Rose Bowl, the mixing of conferences, even whenever like the Big East dissolved and we saw a handful of teams go to the ACC and stuff, that was weird. Like I'm not used
Yeah.
to like Louisville and Miami being in the ACC. I'm used to them being in like the Big East, for example.
Right.
Same with West Virginia going to the Big 12 and so on and so forth. It's tough, man. It's changing. I don't like how it's changing. I wish it could go back to the way it was before money really got involved, but unfortunately, that's just where the world's at. I don't think anything good is going to come out of the big super conferences, because part of the special feeling when Oregon would play Ohio State is this is rare. This does not happen. We do not see this matchup on a regular basis. So whenever big programs like that did get together, it's like, okay, awesome. Same with Texas and Alabama, right? Same with Oklahoma and Florida, right? Like it's when those teams meet, it's supposed to be special. And my biggest fear with all of these conferences kind of joining together and dissolving into each other is a little bit of that is going to be taken away. But I don't know. You're talking to a Pac-12 guy here. Pac-12 After Dark is no longer a thing, and I'm very upset. So
very sad. I mean, I think especially after the year that they had, they finally were able to put some teams together, and that's the sad part for me. I think the sad part is also just the idea that in a super conference, Florida may not play Tennessee every year, or they may not play LSU every year, and just the history of watching those teams play those rivalry games year in and year out to say we're going to get you next year. But also, I think on the playoff side, I mean, I'm here for a playoff game on campus. Like that's I'm going to sit down and watch every second of that. But at the same time, I wouldn't mind going back to just kind of a mix of a 4-team BCS type of era, because I look back, and this is no longer going to be the case, but I look back at Florida's championship run in 06 and in 08. In 08, they lose to Ole Miss, and I remember, I'm probably 11, 12 years old, and I remember my world being crushed because our season's over. And it just seems like it's going to turn into the NFL that a loss, it doesn't determine your season. And I think back of just that last week of college football of being like, all right, we have to win our game. We have to have 2 and 3 lose and we jump up. And I remember in 06 when Michigan lost to Ohio State and they have one loss and it's still Ohio State, and the BCS puts us in over Michigan, and just that drama and just chaos that brought, that you have to win every single game. Now I do think like a year this year, 4 was the right number. There were a lot of really good teams out there. Obviously, I think Michigan was the best, but I don't think that, Texas or Washington shouldn't have been given the ability to play for national championship. But I just think that 12th team that's 8-4, do we really want to see them get boat raced by the 1 seed or however they do it, are going to do it? But it'll be interesting to see. It definitely feels like it's a little watered down. Maybe that's because it's December and not October 31st for us. But we'll see as the time come around.
No, that's a good point too. I really like how you brought up the significance of a loss in the regular season, because I mean, you said it best. Like you drop a game in November and you're like, all right, we really need to win out and have a lot of things happen in order for us to really make this a special season. That's not the case anymore. Like you can lose a game or two and like still feel pretty good about your chances to get in, unless you're Florida State, right? And then I mean, but we saw what happened with the Seminoles, right? I mean, they came out very uninspired, we're kind of over this, and then they got railed by Georgia.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see just how the committee goes about that. But I think, like you brought up of just where does college football go as governing themselves? Do they break off from the NCAA? And I think that definitely needs to happen. I think they need to kind of be their own entity and go from there, because
Really
I think
quick, why are there people on the college football playoff committee that are not involved in football? Can you tell me why Condoleezza Rice was on the damn committee for a
That's a
handful of
great
years?
question, Donnie. I don't understand, if you're building a committee of on anything else. Let's say it's the PTA committee.
Mhm.
You're not going to go down the street and get somebody that has never walked in a school, doesn't understand how schools operate, doesn't have kids that's been to school. Why are we doing that with football? That
Right.
makes zero sense to me.
Why
Absolute
do we have
0 sense.
politicians involved in deciding whether or not Florida State's going to get in or not? It's just wild to me.
They're like, oh yeah, you guys can't figure out the political world. Why don't you come in our world and mess it up as well? I mean, that's a great idea.
Now, granted, like the committee is made up of several other big football minds, and
Right.
like the other people, like said politicians, aren't making the final choice. But still, man, like why are these people helping kind of form and mold this like college football playoff that you guys like so desperately wanted? It's crazy.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. Well, hey Donnie, thanks for jumping on. Give us a score prediction. Steelers, Bills. What's your score prediction?
Man, can I do 9-6? Is that that is my
5-2.
prediction?
You want to take 5-2?
5-2. Man, I'll go like 17-14. I really don't think that's going to be a high scoring game, but I mean, knowing
Yeah.
my luck,
Yeah.
knowing my luck, everybody should go smash the over after I said
Yeah,
that. So
everybody
we'll
go
see.
smash the over, sponsored by Donnie Druin. Yeah,
Yep.
I think it's a low scoring game there. I think that Josh Allen runs one in. And I think a defensive score or special team scores happens tonight, maybe a blocked, field goal, a blocked punt. So
Oh, I can see it.
I'm gonna go 13-9
Okay.
Buffalo, with the only
Tough, gritty game.
touchdown. Yeah, the only touchdown being a defensive touchdown.
I buy that. Everything you just said, I can
Anything
totally
could
see
happen
happening,
tonight.
man. It's wild.
Anything. Yeah. All right, guys. Well, that's going to wrap it up for episode 1. We'll try to do one of these a week, have Donnie on every now and then. Donnie, why don't you just tell the folks just where they can find some of your stuff on Twitter and online?
Yeah, on Twitter, follow my work at Donnie Druin in the little text box below. And then I cover the Phoenix Suns and Arizona Cardinals for SI.com. So you can find my work at SI.com/NFL/Cardinals or SI.com/NBA/Suns.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks for joining us. Until next time, so long, everybody.